It's an indicator we hear about every year. Overshoot Day alerts us to the day humanity uses up all the natural resources the Earth can regenerate annually. For the past 30 years, this date has continued to speed up, except for a temporary reprieve at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic last year. Back in 1990, Overshoot Day fell on the 10th of October, and this year we will be living on credit from the 29th of July. The equation is simple. According to the Global Footprint Network, Overshoot Day is calculated by dividing the planet's biocapacity by its ecological footprint. The methodology has been placed into question by scientists. They claim the calculation doesn't take into account mineral resources nor spaces needed for biodiversity or even plastic waste.
In the ecological footprint calculation, we take into account the capacity to absorb waste, but the only waste that's taken into account is CO2, and there is other waste that's produced.
Experts also warn that focusing on the world as a whole and not individual countries dilutes the gravity of the problem. This map shows countries in red, which are over-consuming natural resources. Those in green have a biocapacity reserve, but their numbers are few. Despite its scientific imperfections, Overshoot Day continues to meet its goal by alerting the public of the importance of saving natural resources on Earth.
Et on sait que le climat a été plus chaud qu'aujourd'hui, il y a 125 000 ans par exemple. Ça a été ce qu'on appelle le dernier interglaciaire, le climat était plus chaud. Mais la problématique qu'on a aujourd'hui, c'est une question de vitesse. On n'a jamais eu des changements aussi rapides, avec une telle amplitude.
It's a travesty. Everything here is pretty hard to stomach. It's not a real palatable sight when you look at dead livestock, dead wildlife, dead stands of timber. I don't think this thing's going to heal in the next 250 years. My grandkids won't see it be like it was a month ago. But we're not dead. We've got our homes, so you gotta weigh your blessings, I suppose.
Climate change in some way is like steroids for the weather. If there's a famous sports player that performed quite well, then started taking steroids, then their performance, increased beyond what was possible before that.
Aber die Summe aller Ereignisse, die wir in Deutschland erleben und auch die Ausschläge, die wir jetzt erleben, die deuten darauf hin, wenn man der Wissenschaft glaubt, und das tue ich bekanntermaßen, dass das etwas mit dem Klimawandel zu tun hat. Es gibt ja auch sehr interessante Erklärungsmodelle, warum es zu solchen stehenden Regenfällen kommt. Und das bedeutet, dass wir uns noch mehr vornehmen müssen.
पाच लोक होती. माझी आई होती, माझा भाऊ होता, भाऊजई होती आणि भावाची एक मुलगी आणि मुलगा होता. टोटल म्हणजे फक्त मुलगा सापडलेला आहे. बाकीच्या 4 बॉड्या अजून सापडलेल्या नाहीत.
Maintenant, on a besoin de se tourner de plus en plus vers les solutions. Donc, comment atténuer ce changement climatique, comment le combattre, et aussi des solutions à la question de l'adaptation, c'est-à-dire de savoir comment on va pouvoir faire avec les conditions climatiques qui sont inévitables, quel que soit le scénario qui sera adopté.
It's the first time in 5 days that Nadir can enter this room in his home. He says he and his family were asleep when the waters came cascading. He's now trying to salvage what he can.
We escaped with the clothes on our back and left everything behind. The waters came from a valley in the east and kept rising quickly. It's only this morning that some streams that were blocked were opened and the levels have gone down a bit, but water keeps coming.
More than 60 houses in Nadir's neighborhood have been partially or completely destroyed by the rising waters, the result of heavy rains coming off the mountains and swelling rivers. People say it's the worst they've seen in years.
This used to be part of my home, but the walls and ceilings have collapsed. My savings were in this room as well as important documents. All have been washed away along with some things I brought to sell people.
Officials say at least 10,000 people have been affected and more than 2,000 have been displaced. Sudan's government says more floods are expected in many parts of the country during the annual rainy season in August and has urged those at risk to take necessary precautions. While some families have opted to stay in their homes despite the floods, others had no option but to leave. The state authorities have been criticized for not acting fast enough. And as it's only the start of the rainy season, it's feared that more houses are in danger of collapse and that more people will suffer. This school is where some families have sought refuge. Many are still waiting for aid days after the floods, and concerns are growing over lack of basic necessities.
There are elderly people here with us, and there are kids who need urgent care. They need food and medicines. The government needs to act immediately.
Others are also calling on aid organizations for assistance.
The floods have brought with it snakes and scorpions, and we need anti-venom drugs. We need international aid organizations to step in and help before things get worse, as the rain season continues.
Al-Fao is one of the underdeveloped rural areas in Sudan, and Nader worries it will take too long before they get the help they need. Hiba Morgan, Al Jazeera, Al-Fao, Gadaref, Sudan.
In the pouring rain, people come to see what happened or salvage what's left. The makeshift homes built from plastic sheets and bamboo poles had no chance when this muddy hillside collapsed in torrential rains.
My sister went to the bathroom, and after she returned, the side of the hill came down. I have one niece and two nephews and my sister. My brother-in-law, along with the other family members, managed to get out of the shelter, but the cliff came down on those four and the entire shelter was damaged. 2 of them died and 2 others were injured.
The powerful monsoon rains caused a flood that reached roof height in some areas of the Kutupalong camp. More than 100 tents are said to have been washed away by the water. Kutupalong in Bangladesh is the world's biggest refugee camp and the most densely populated. It's home to more than 1 million Rohingya who fled a crackdown by the military in neighbouring Myanmar. It's overcrowded, basic, and prone to landslides and flooding.
We have informed the people at risk here to move away. If they do not comply with our request, we will take alternate steps. Since it's raining so much, we hope the Rohingya population at the camp will move away from risky dwellings.
The government says all the Rohingya will be resettled as soon as possible, and that measures are being taken to minimise casualties caused by the annual rains. But rights groups say it's not enough, and that the floods prove once more how vulnerable the Rohingya refugees are to the impacts of climate change. Many are now sheltering in mosques and schools and facing the prospect of having lost their homes again. Alexia O'Brien, Al Jazeera.
It's a long wait in an uncomfortable chair, but they've decided today is the day. Mariama is receiving the vaccine despite her earlier reservations.
I didn't trust the vaccine at first. That's why I didn't take it. When I saw my parents were vaccinated and that everything went well for them, I decided to get the shot.
Vaccination points are getting closer to people's homes. Near the local mosque or sports stadium, hundreds of thousands of doses arrived in Senegal this week.
It's important to note that this strategy, which is a proximity strategy, allows us to bring the vaccine close to the population. It will allow us to considerably accelerate our rollout. Because we know today that the pandemic is gaining ground and we must move faster than the Delta variant.
The Delta variant is fueling a third wave, and more Senegalese see the writing on the wall. The pandemic is in their neighborhood. Nearly 1 million people have been vaccinated, but there aren't enough doses to go round, and millions more are needed.
Everyone is here. We're moving now because before we used to say it was for the elderly. But now we see 13-year-old kids getting sick. We see younger people in their 20s dying. It's a total panic now.
Hospitals in Dakar are overflowing with new arrivals. The Ministry of Health says its facilities are already operating at 100% capacity for severe and critical patients, meaning every bed with oxygen available is taken. The head of infectious diseases at Fan Hospital says it's just the tip of the iceberg.
To tell you the truth, the situation is catastrophic. We are a bit overwhelmed. Doctors would like to take care of the patients, but the main issue is the lack of equipment and available places.
When family members began to fall ill, Idrissa returned to Senegal, only to begin counting the number of loved ones lost. This time, a cousin, only 40 years old.
I was in a cemetery Yesterday, in one day alone, average, usually we bury about 3-4 people. Yesterday alone, they buried 35 people. So there is something going on. This is the world crisis. I'm sorry that my people here, they kind of figured it out a little bit too late. I wish they would have figured it out a little bit sooner. But now we're just trying to catch up.
Less than 2% of the Senegalese population has been fully vaccinated, and with hospitals overwhelmed, doses are in high demand. Andrew Chappelle, Al Jazeera.
What has the Vatican, the heart of the Roman Catholic Church, and Chelsea, one of the most exclusive and desirable parts of London, got in common? It isn't religion, it's money, lots of it. Then add to that murky deals, extortion and fraud revolving around a central figure, not a godfather, a Catholic cardinal, Angelo Becciu. He was a close advisor to Pope Francis, who fired him last year, accusing him of nepotism. But this scandal is far bigger than favours for friends and family. Becciu and 9 others face charges including embezzlement, extortion, money laundering and abuse of office. It was here in London's upmarket Chelsea that Becciu became involved, it's alleged, with a major investment of $412 million in this real estate. But the church money was wasted because of a scam and overvaluations. Prosecutors say 2 London-based Italian financiers received vast sums of money from the Vatican for reckless speculative investments. The former Vatican financial regulator, Swiss lawyer René Brulhart, was also involved. Becciu is said to have been involved in other fraudulent schemes too, much of it using money donated by the Catholic faithful. Pope Francis has made reforms in the Vatican's justice system. This trial is the first to see a cardinal indicted by criminal prosecutors. Other churchmen used to be in judgment.
He was one of the most powerful figures in the Vatican, and for him now to be facing trial is really extraordinary. It is, I think, a sign of the seriousness with which Pope Francis has taken the task of cleaning up Vatican finances.
Becciu, who had once considered becoming a candidate for the papacy, denies all charges and says he's the victim of a Vatican conspiracy. Andrew Simmons, Al Jazeera.
Sydney, Australia's poorest neighbourhoods will be getting military enforcement of the city's toughest and longest COVID lockdown. Restrictions began 5 weeks ago amid an outbreak of the Delta variant. Still, case numbers in the city of 5 million have remained high. So starting Monday, Australian Army personnel will help police knock on the doors of people who have tested positive to ensure they are isolating. For more on this story, let's cross to our correspondent in Sydney, Rochelle Harrison-Pless. Rochelle, why did the government decide that the military needed to get involved here, and what other details can you tell us?
Well, it's not the first time that the Army has been called in to help during this pandemic. They helped out in Melbourne last year at the height of the outbreak in Victoria. They were also helping out with hotel quarantine here in Sydney, but also other cities across Australia. Now, we know that some 300 soldiers will assist state police with compliance operations across 8 local government areas in Western and Southwestern Sydney, where currently nearly 2 million people, nearly 2 million residents are under hard lockdown. Now, these soldiers have deployed today to do training, do some training over the weekend, and then we'll see boots on the ground as early as Monday. They'll be assisting police to ensure that people are doing the right thing, that they're complying with the tougher restrictions of this hard lockdown. And it comes as authorities have today been given new, wider powers to crack down on businesses and people found to be breaching public health orders.
Now, Rochelle, it does appear that there is some growing resentment over the lockdown in Sydney. What are some of the concerns following the announcement that the military is now involved?
Well, one of the biggest concerns is that the New South Wales Police Commissioner Mick Fuller today confirmed that not all soldiers will be vaccinated. So that's understandably causing some alarm, as we know that the Delta variant is a much more contagious strain of this virus. Now, the second concern, though, is for migrants and refugees who have fled war-torn countries or who perhaps associate the military with traumatic experiences. Some people in the community say that this move to call in the army will make some people feel even more singled out, targeted, feel blamed for this outbreak where cases are remaining stubbornly high, but which actually started in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. Now, I have spoken to several community leaders and counsellors and psychologists over the past couple of days in the wake of this news, all people who live and work in those affected LGAs, and they've all said that seeing boots on the ground, this could really trigger some very painful memories for some of these people living in these communities. However, the Defence Minister, Peter Dutton, today said that he wants people to see the military as a reassuring presence. Charlie.
Our correspondent in Sydney, Rochelle Harrison-Plass, thank you so much for that reporting.
With millions of South Africans dependent on public transport, the government is not taking any chances. Rival taxi associations have been fighting for ownership of a busy route. Confrontations have raged for years. And it's got worse. With more than 80 people killed so far this year, 24 of them in July alone. Among those injured, a 5-month-old baby. Commuters, drivers and bystanders say they are living in fear.
We can't exactly drive like the way we used to, you see, because you don't know when they're gonna shoot now.
We're sitting at a taxi rank and 2 guys or 3 guys came and around the corner, and then we're just enjoying the sunshine outside the container where we normally operate. And those guys came towards us running with guns, you know, and then they came shoot one of our colleagues.
Peace talks have so far failed, prompting authorities to close the notorious route for the next 2 months and to make buses available to commuters as an alternative.
The measures taken by government have helped to quell the violence, for now at least, but commuters are still being severely affected. Every evening, thousands queue for hours before making the journey home by bus. For many, it doesn't stop there. They are then forced to walk long distances in the dark in order to get home.
We don't have a bus which goes to Langa, so now I have to take a bus to the next town, that is Bonteville. Then I drop off there, then I walk.
I'm still scared. Even now, I'm not safe. I know about, I'm not safe. You see, but I'm taking a risk.
With lives and livelihoods at stake, commuters, effectively held hostage by the taxi war, are desperate for a solution to the violence. Robin Smith, Al Jazeera, Cape Town.
Before you reach the passport office in Kabul, you pass these stalls of administrators. Passport applicants pay them to do their paperwork. In the 5 years Mohammed Asif has done this, he's never been busier.
Since there's been a lot of violence and the American forces are gone, people don't trust the security situation. That's why a lot of people are applying. Most of them are families. They come and apply with their children.
26-year-old Zabiullah Tareen isn't leaving yet, but he says everyone he knows is preparing for that day.
There's conflict and war in every district, so we're getting passports ready in case the situation gets worse, so we can go away to a safe place.
He's not alone. At dawn, this is the queue to apply for passports. Thousands are here every day, but the number of people leaving is even more. There is a constant stream of Afghan refugees crossing into Turkey near the Iran border. The UN says in the 3 weeks to July the 15th, up to 40% more Afghans fled without passports or visas, some using smugglers. Turkey detained 1,500 mostly Afghan migrants in 1 week. To make the journey and set up a new life, they need money. So, as many prepare to leave, they are selling their assets. The UN's migration agency says 20 to 30,000 people are now escaping abroad every week. And at this rate, 1.5 million Afghans could be headed towards Europe by the end of the year. For 8 years, Nazar Mohammed Nazari and his best friends have met outside this car yard. They sit and talk for hours.
We don't know if we'll be alive the next second, so that's why every person right now is in the process of or trying to get out of the country. There is no place for Afghans in this country anymore.
30 years ago, Nazar fled to Denmark as a refugee. He only returned in 2001 when the US invaded.
When the Americans came and brought their forces, we thought we are saved. We thought all this misfortune is over. But now we think that was the start of our misfortune.
Prized possessions passed down through families are also being left behind. Khan Mohammed faces a conflict of interest. As a second-hand dealer, he profits from the goods that come his way, but he knows what people are giving up in order to flee Afghanistan. He wishes they didn't have to. Charlotte Ballas, Al Jazeera, Kabul.
Just a few weeks ago, the White House was touting what it said would be a summer of joy and freedom. Things have changed.
This is an American tragedy. People are dying and will die who don't have to die. If you're out there unvaccinated, you don't have to die.
The US president announced a mixture of incentives and requirements. Employers will be reimbursed for paid sick leave given to employees to get vaccinated, and Biden urged local authorities to use emergency federal aid to offer the unvaccinated $100 to get their shots. In addition, federal government employees and contractors will be required to disclose their vaccination status. If they refuse or are unvaccinated, they will be required to wear a mask no matter their location, physically distance from others, be tested weekly or twice weekly, and have travel restrictions imposed. But this isn't a federal vaccine mandate. The president said he wasn't clear about the legality of one, and federal employees have a choice not to get vaccinated, but clearly their working lives will be more difficult as a result. Biden made it clear this was not a partisan issue.
The vaccine was developed and authorized under a Republican administration, and it's been distributed and administered under a Democratic administration. The vaccines are safe, highly effective. There's nothing political about them.
We have a country in crisis.
That wasn't the message on Capitol Hill, where masks are now mandatory in the House of Representatives, leading to statements of outrage from the Republican minority leader. He tweeted that liberal officials wanted to live in a perpetual pandemic state, which led to this withering response from the Democratic Speaker of the House.
Leader McCarthy says it's against the science.
It's a very unusual, rare event.
The administration's leading virus expert has been trying to explain this is a dynamic situation.
What's changed, Judy, is the virus has changed. The Delta variant has a very unusual capability of spreading much more easily than the Alpha did.
The debate about masking in schools is getting heated across the country.
These kids are not affected. Please stop the insanity. You have already done damage to these kids by having them wear masks.
It is.
But other parents argue that it's masking up that would end the confusion about safety.
Oh, tremendously more so comfortable because strategy worked. They proved it worked. They proved it worked last year.
But perhaps there are some hopeful signs that those who've decided not to get vaccinated so far may not be firmly entrenched in their position, while still weighed down from the